My name is Ezra Wilson, 35 years old, standing at my uncle's 4th of July barbecue with grease-stained hands. I was just helping with the burgers when my cousin Trevor smirked from his lawn chair. "So you push papers for the army?" he mocked. I dried my hands on a checkered towel, feeling that familiar burn in my chest. "No, I pilot," I replied simply. He chuckled. "Sure you do. What's your call sign?" I hesitated before answering. "Iron Widow." His father, Uncle Jackson, a retired Navy SEAL, froze mid-conversation across the yard. "Son, say sorry now. Before we continue, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had family doubt what you're capable of." I grew up in rural Kansas, where the horizon stretched endlessly across golden wheat fields. My parents, Thomas and Sarah Wilson, were third-generation farmers who worked from dawn till dusk. We lived in a modest 2-story farmhouse that creaked with every prairie wind, yet felt solid and eternal against the landscape. My fascination with flying began when I was just 6 years old. Military aircraft would occasionally roar overhead, training exercises from the nearby McConnell Air Force Base. While other kids covered their ears, I'd stand transfixed, neck craned toward the sky, feeling the vibration in my chest long after the planes disappeared. My dad would find me in the barn loft sometimes, staring at the clouds, dreaming of being up there. My mother's brother, Jackson, was the family celebrity. A decorated Navy SEAL with multiple deployments, Uncle Jackson embodied everything heroic about military service. During family gatherings, he'd command attention with stories that carefully balanced between what he could share and classified operations. Trevor, 2 years younger than me, worshipped his father. He'd strut around in miniature Navy uniforms, plastic weapons strapped to his side. Wilsons serve in the Navy, Uncle Jackson would declare during Thanksgiving dinners. "It's tradition." My father, the odd one out having married into the naval family, would quietly sip his beer, never challenging his brother-in-law. Everything changed when I turned 10. My dad surprised me with a trip to an Air Force open house at McConnell. That day altered the trajectory of my life completely. I still remember walking across the tarmac, feeling insignificant beside the massive aircraft. The gleaming fuselages, the precision of the pilots in their flight suits, everything about it seemed larger than life. During that visit, I met Colonel William Foster, a veteran pilot with salt and pepper hair and laugh lines that deepened when he smiled. He let me sit in the cockpit of an F-16, my small hands barely reaching the control stick. "You know what makes a good pilot, son?" he asked, helping me adjust the oversized helmet. "Quick reflexes?" I guessed. He tapped his temple. "A good mind. The plane goes where your brain tells it to go. Never forget that." From that day forward, my path was clear. While Trevor played with Navy SEAL action figures, I built model aircraft and read every book about flying I could get my hands on. My bedroom walls transformed from blank farmhouse white to a collage of fighter jets and space shuttles. My sister, Amy, 4 years younger, became my greatest ally. She'd hold the flashlight when I read aviation books under the covers past bedtime and defend my Air Force ambitions during family gatherings. "Leave Ezra alone," she'd say when Trevor teased me. "At least he knows what he wants." High school at Oak Ridge was where I truly began working toward my goal. I joined every science and mathematics club, stayed after hours for extra physics lessons, and started running each morning to build the stamina I'd need. My grades climbed steadily until I was near the top of my class. My English teacher, Mrs. Henderson, helped me craft application essays that spoke of service, duty, and the sky's infinite possibility. The real turning point came during junior year when the Blue Angels performed at a nearby air show. Watching their precision formation, flying aircraft seemingly connected by invisible threads, moving as one through impossible maneuvers, I felt tears on my face. My grandfather, a Vietnam-era pilot who rarely spoke about his service, stood beside me that day. He squeezed my shoulder and nodded. No words needed. When the ROTC scholarship letter arrived, my parents were ecstatic. My father framed it, hanging it prominently in the living room. But at the next family gathering, when I announced my plans to attend the Air Force Academy instead of Annapolis, the temperature in the room dropped noticeably. "The Air Force?" Uncle Jackson's eyebrows rose. "They're the guys who drop bombs and fly home to sleep in their own beds. The Navy, we're the ones who do the real fighting." Trevor, then 16, snickered. "Guess you don't have what it takes to be a SEAL, cousin." My mother tried to mediate. Jackson, Ezra has always loved planes. This is his dream. But something shifted that day. What had been good-natured rivalry hardened into something more corrosive. Trevor's teasing gained a sharper edge, and Uncle Jackson's proud stories now seemed pointed, designed to highlight the superiority of naval service. The night before I left for the academy, my grandfather visited. He brought a small wooden box containing his pilot's wings from Vietnam. "The sky doesn't care which branch you serve in," he said, pressing the box into my hands. "Just that you honor those wings every time you take flight." With those wings tucked safely in my duffel and my family's mixed emotions behind me, I boarded a bus toward Colorado Springs, determined to prove myself not just to my family but to myself. The Air Force Academy loomed before me that first day, the famous chapel spires reaching skyward like aircraft contrails frozen in time. Surrounded by the Rocky Mountains, the campus seemed both inspiring and intimidating. I wasn't a farm boy anymore. I was Cadet Wilson, just one blue uniform among hundreds. Basic training hit like a thunderstorm. 5 a.m. Wake-ups to run 5 miles before breakfast. Drill instructors who could find fault with perfectly made beds. Academic courses that demanded perfection. Physical challenges that pushed beyond exhaustion into some new territory where your body moves purely on discipline and determination. The purpose isn't to break you, our training officer, Captain Briggs, explained during a rare, quiet moment. It's to find out if you can be unbreakable when it matters most. The academic workload nearly drowned me those first months. Advanced physics, aerodynamics, engineering principles, all on top of military history, strategy, and leadership courses. Many nights I studied until 2 a.m., only to rise 3 hours later for physical training. I lost 15 pounds that first semester, my already lean farm boy frame becoming almost gaunt. It was during a particularly grueling obstacle course that I met Michael Carter, a fellow cadet from Chicago with an easy smile that belied his fierce determination. We finished the course neck and neck, both collapsing in exhausted laughter at the end. "You're pretty fast for a scarecrow," he wheezed, extending his hand. "You're pretty tough for a city boy," I shot back, gripping his hand. That handshake began a friendship that would carry us both through the academy. Michael had a brilliant mathematical mind, but struggled with the physical requirements. I helped him improve his running form and upper body strength. In return, he tutored me through the more challenging engineering concepts and fluid dynamics equations that sometimes left me staring blankly at textbooks at midnight. The irony was that Michael, who had no military background, adapted more easily to the rigid hierarchy and protocols than I did. My independent farming upbringing sometimes clashed with the strict chain of command. "You can't argue with the system, Ezra," Michael would warn after I questioned an instructor's approach. "You have to work within it." The first real shock came during our second year. After months of simulator training, we finally began actual flight instruction in T-6 Texan II trainers. I'd dreamed of this moment for years, but nothing prepared me for the overwhelming sensory experience of actual flight. The G-forces pressing me into the seat, the disorienting roll of horizon lines shifting, the deafening roar even through the helmet. My first solo flight approach was textbook perfect until a sudden crosswind caught the aircraft. I overcorrected, nearly sending the plane into a dangerous bank angle. My instructor's voice crackled through the radio, calm but urgent, guiding me back to level flight. I landed safely, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking for hours afterward. The following week, I failed my emergency procedures check a simulator test, replicating multiple system failures. While others responded with calm precision, I froze at a critical moment, overthinking the sequence instead of trusting my training. "Failed," the evaluator said simply, making a notation on his clipboard. I walked out of the simulator in a daze. All those years of dreams, and I'd choked when it mattered. For the first time, I considered the possibility that wanting something desperately didn't guarantee success. That evening, as I sat alone in the dormitory stairwell, flight instructor Anthony Reynolds found me. A former F-15 pilot with over 3,000 flight hours, Reynolds had a reputation for being demanding but fair. "You know what your problem is, Wilson?" he asked, sitting beside me. I braced for criticism. I panicked. "Sir, no. Your problem is, you're trying to be perfect." He leaned against the wall. "Flying isn't about perfection, it's about adaptation. Things go wrong up there, always have, always will. What matters is how quickly you recognize it and respond. But I failed, I said. So you'll take it again. And if necessary, again after that. He stood to leave. Unless you'd rather quit and join the Navy. There was the ghost of a smile on his face. That was the challenge I needed. I scheduled additional simulator time, practiced emergency procedures until they became muscle memory rather than conscious thought. Michael quizzed me on systems knowledge during meals. The pressure intensified when word spread that I was related to a famous SEAL. Some instructors seemed to hold me to a higher standard, wondering aloud if I had the same elite material as my uncle. Others questioned why I hadn't followed family tradition into naval service. They're just trying to get in your head, Michael said. Don't let them. When retake day arrived, I entered the simulator with a different mindset. Instead of dreading failure, I embraced the challenge. When cascading systems failures began, I responded not with rigid procedural thinking, but with calm assessment and decisive action. Acceptable performance. The evaluator noted high praise in Academy terms. The remaining years brought new challenges. Formation flying, night operations, navigation exercises. I wasn't always the most natural pilot, but I became known for methodical preparation and steady improvement. While some cadets peaked early, I continued an upward trajectory. Graduation day arrived with blue skies and mountain backdrops. My parents beamed from the audience, my father unabashedly wiping tears. My sister Amy cheered loud enough to embarrass herself. Even my grandfather made the trip, oxygen tank in tow, his aged pilot's eyes assessing the aircraft flyover with professional appreciation. Uncle Jackson and Trevor attended too, offering congratulations that seemed genuine if somewhat reserved. "Well, you did it," Uncle Jackson said, shaking my hand firmly. Now comes the real test. He wasn't wrong. Academy training, as difficult as it had been, was just preparation. The real challenges, the ones that would ultimately define me, waited in the skies far from American soil. My first deployment orders came 6 months after completing specialized FVMOC Treative Lightning II training, Middle East, Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. I remember staring at the assignment paperwork, feeling a surreal mixture of excitement and dread. This wasn't a training exercise or simulation. This was the real thing. The heat hit me like a physical wall when I stepped off the transport plane in Qatar. 115 degrees, the air so dry it seemed to pull moisture from your lungs with each breath. The massive base sprawled across the desert landscape, a small American city of concrete barriers, aircraft hangars, and temporary housing units. "Welcome to the sandbox," said Staff Sergeant Rivera, who drove me from the airfield to processing. "First deployment?" I nodded, taking in the monochromatic beige landscape through dust-streaked windows. "You'll get used to it," he said, though his tone suggested I wouldn't. After 3 days of orientation, security briefings, and acclimation training, I reported to my squadron. 8 pilots, including myself, part of the 34th Fighter Squadron, call sign Raptors. Our mission: provide air support for ground operations, surveillance flights, and occasional show-of-force missions along contested borders. Squadron leader Marcus Sullivan was a legend in his own right, 20 years in service, over 4,000 flight hours, and a distinguished Flying Cross from earlier conflicts. Silver-haired but fit, with weather-lined features that rarely betrayed emotion. "Wilson," he acknowledged, reviewing my file during our first meeting. "Good academic scores, limited practical experience." He looked up, studying my face. "Flying here isn't like flying back home. The stakes are higher, the variables unpredictable. You understand?" "Yes, sir," I replied, trying to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. "Good. You're flying wing with Thomas tomorrow. 600 hours. Don't be late." Elijah Thomas became my closest friend in the squadron. A Brooklyn native with an infectious laugh and non-stop commentary on everything from military politics to baseball statistics. Despite his easygoing nature, he was a skilled pilot with natural instincts. "The F-35 is a prima donna," he told me, during pre-flight checks that first morning. "Treats you real nice until you disrespect her, then she'll let you know who's boss." He patted the aircraft's fuselage affectionately. Our first missions were routine patrol flights over friendly territory, familiarization with local airspace, and occasional escort duties for transport aircraft. Each flight increased my confidence, each successful landing a small victory against the doubt that had followed me from training. The cockpit of the F-35 became my sanctuary. Despite the cramped space, I felt more at home there than in my barracks. The aircraft system's extensions of my own senses, its power responsive to my smallest input. In the air, heritage and family expectations couldn't touch me. 3 months into deployment, everything changed. A forward operating base near the Syrian border came under heavy attack at 3 a.m. Special Operations Forces were pinned down, requesting immediate air support. Our squadron scrambled, racing through abbreviated pre-flight checks. "Stay on my wing. Keep your eyes open," Elijah advised as we taxied. First combat sorties are always memorable. Memorable didn't begin to cover it. Flying through pre-dawn darkness, the landscape below illuminated by firefights and burning vehicles. Radio chatter filled with urgent voices, coordinates passed rapidly, targets identified and confirmed. Sullivan took lead, coordinating with ground forces to identify enemy positions. Raptor 1, cleared hot, came the authorization. Sullivan's aircraft released precision munitions, explosions blossoming in night vision green on my display. "Wilson, Thomas, sweep north. Reports of enemy reinforcements moving in from those hills," Sullivan ordered. We banked sharply, accelerating toward the northern approach. Below us, the landscape was a maze of ravines and rocky outcroppings, perfect cover for approaching forces. "I've got movement. 3 vehicles," Elijah reported. "Armed personnel disembarking. Confirming hostile intent." The ground controller's voice crackled through. "Confirmed hostile. Clear to engage." What followed was a choreography of precision strikes, the F-35's advanced targeting systems allowing us to neutralize threats with minimal collateral damage. The adrenaline narrowed my focus to a laser-point threat assessment, weapons selection, deployment, confirmation. As dawn broke, the situation at the base stabilized. We maintained air presence, deterring further attacks. Just as we received clearance to return to base, a desperate radio call came through. "Any air assets? This is Badger Team. Civilians trapped in village 2 clicks east of the base. Hostile forces approaching. Request immediate assistance." Sullivan's voice came through our comms. "Fuel check, all aircraft." Most of us, having been airborne for hours, were approaching minimum safe reserves. Only Elijah and I, having arrived later in the engagement, had sufficient fuel remaining. "Thomas, Wilson, divert to these coordinates," Sullivan ordered. "Provide cover for civilian evacuation. Keep it tight, keep it clean." "Copy that," Elijah responded, already banking toward the village. "Let's go save some lives, Ezra." The village was small, maybe 20 buildings clustered around a central well. A group of aid workers and local families were loading into vehicles, desperately trying to evacuate as armed militants approached from the east. "I'll take high cover," I said, positioning my aircraft to maintain surveillance. "I'll go low. Make sure they see us," Elijah replied. "Sometimes just knowing we're here is enough deterrence." He dropped altitude, making a deliberate pass over the approaching militants. His aircraft's shadow raced across the desert floor, a message more clear than words. "We see you. We're watching." For a moment, it worked. The militant vehicles stopped, clearly reassessing their approach. Then came the flash from the ridgeline. Something streaked upward, a shoulder-launched missile that no intelligence had indicated they possessed. Elijah's aircraft sensed the threat, automatically deploying countermeasures, but the missile adjusted course. "Missile lock! Evading!" Elijah's voice tensed. I watched helplessly as his aircraft banked hard, attempting to break the lock. For a moment, it seemed he'd succeeded, the missile tracking wide. Then it corrected, faster than seemed possible. The impact was catastrophic. Elijah's F-35 shuddered, fire blooming from the left engine. His voice remained remarkably calm on the radio. "Mayday, Mayday. Aircraft hit, systems failing." "Eject," I shouted, already diving my aircraft toward the militants, weapons hot. "Eject now. Negative controls responding. I can make it to safety." His damaged aircraft limped toward open desert, away from the village. "Cover the civilians." I was torn between following my wingman and protecting the evacuation. Training dictated I stay with the mission, but everything inside me screamed to follow Elijah. "Wilson, maintain position." Sullivan's voice cut through my indecision, somehow already returning to the area. "We've got rescue inbound for Thomas." I complied, raining hellfire on the militants who had targeted my friend. Each weapon's release felt personal, each explosion a promise that the civilians would escape safely, that Elijah's sacrifice would mean something. 10 minutes later, Sullivan's grim voice confirmed what I'd feared. "Since seeing that missile strike, all units, be advised. Raptor 3 is down. Pilot did not survive." The words hit harder than any physical blow. Elijah had ejected too late, his parachute unable to fully deploy before impact. He died alone in the desert, miles from his beloved Brooklyn. That night, I sat on my bunk, staring at Elijah's empty bed across the room. His baseball cap hung on the corner post. A family photo taped to the wall showed him with his parents and younger sisters, arms around each other, the Manhattan skyline behind them. In that moment, the reality of war crashed through the professional detachment I'd cultivated. This wasn't a training scenario where mistakes meant poor evaluations. This was a world where seconds of hesitation cost lives, where my friend went up in flames while I watched through a targeting display. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply sat, memorizing every detail of Elijah's space, making silent promises to a man who could no longer hear them. The days following Elijah's death passed in a numbing blur. The squadron maintained operations, gaps in the flight schedule filled, mission briefings continuing with mechanical precision. Military efficiency waits for no one's grief. His bunk was cleared within 48 hours, personal effects packaged for shipment home. Only the indentation in his mattress remained, a subtle reminder of the body that once rested there. I'd stare at that shallow depression each night, wondering if it would eventually disappear too, like everything else about my friend. A memorial service was held in the base chapel. Sullivan spoke about duty and sacrifice, carefully crafted words that somehow missed Elijah's essence entirely. His terrible puns, his superstitious habit of tapping the aircraft nose before each flight, his collection of New York Yankees statistics. I wasn't sleeping. Whenever I closed my eyes, I'd hear his final radio transmissions. The calm professionalism, even as his aircraft burned around him. During daylight hours, I functioned on autopilot, performing required duties with mechanical precision, while feeling disconnected from my surroundings. 2 weeks after we lost Elijah, Colonel Henderson, the base operations commander, summoned me to his office. A compact man with penetrating eyes and a reputation for brutal directness, Henderson wasted no time on pleasantries. "I need your head in the game, Wilson," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "Special operation. Classified. Eyes only." Inside were aerial reconnaissance photos of a mountain complex near the Afghan border, intelligence summaries, infrared signatures indicating underground facilities, and most critically, information about 6 captured Special Forces operators being held somewhere within the complex. "Hostage rescue?" I asked, studying the terrain. "Steep mountains, narrow valleys, minimal approach options. Extraction team is standing by. They need air support to get in and out." He leaned forward. "This isn't standard operating procedure. It's high risk, potentially high reward." "Why me, sir? I'm one of the least experienced pilots in the squadron." Henderson's gaze hardened. "Because you knew Lieutenant Martin personally." The name hit me like a physical blow. Jason Martin, one of the captured operators, had been Elijah's childhood friend from Brooklyn. They'd enlisted together before their paths diverged at basic training. Elijah had mentioned him often. "This isn't about revenge, Wilson," Henderson continued, reading my expression. "It's about motivation. I need someone who'll push beyond standard parameters if necessary." "When?" I asked. 24 hours. Details to follow." He stood, indicating our meeting was over. "And Wilson?" This conversation never happened. The mission planning was meticulous. 4 aircraft, 2 F-35 seconds for precision strike capability, 2 Aten seconds for close air support if the extraction went sideways. I would fly lead in one of the F-35 seconds, paired with Captain Daniel Rodriguez, an experienced pilot with multiple combat deployments. The approach route threaded through mountain valleys to minimize radar exposure. Timing was coordinated to the second extraction team insertion, our airstrike on defensive positions, and the critical extraction window. "We'll have a 15-minute window to neutralize air defenses before the team inserts," Rodriguez noted during our private briefing. "Miss that window, they abort." I studied the threat assessments, committing each air defense position to memory. Shoulder-launched missiles like the one that took down Elijah, radar-guided anti-aircraft artillery, possibly even obsolete fighter aircraft in hardened hangars. The night before the mission, I couldn't even pretend to sleep. Instead, I wrote letters to my parents, my sister, Michael from the academy, people who deserved more than a standardized condolence note if things went wrong. I sealed each one, addressed them, and tucked them into my locker. Pre-dawn briefing, final intelligence updates, weather reports, communications protocols. The extraction team, 8 Navy SEALs, led by Commander William Hayes, sat silently in the back of the room, faces impassive. "Any questions?" Henderson asked as the briefing concluded. Silence. Wheels up in 30. Good hunting. The pre-flight checks felt different that morning. Each switch, each system verification carried additional weight. As I strapped into the cockpit, I placed Elijah's squadron patch beside my instrument panel. Not regulation, but no one would see it but me. Takeoff was at 0430. The desert still dark around us. 4 aircraft climbing into pre-dawn darkness, maintaining radio silence until reaching operational airspace. Rodriguez flew on my wing, her aircraft a shadow against stars. 2 hours of tense flight, navigating through mountain passes, maintaining terrain masking to avoid early detection. The mission clock in my helmet display counted down relentlessly toward the designated time on target. 5 minutes to target area, I transmitted. Weapons hot, sensors active. As we crested the final ridge, the target complex came into view in the valley below. Bunker entrances carved into mountainsides. Defensive positions along ridge lines. A small airfield with 3 covered hangars. Raptor 1. Engaging primary targets, I announced, designating the air defense systems for my initial strike. My first missile release felt like exhaling after holding my breath too long. Advanced munitions streaked toward radar installations and missile batteries, precision guidance ensuring minimal collateral damage while maximizing tactical impact. Rodriguez followed seconds later, targeting secondary positions. The Aten seconds held high, awaiting the extraction team's arrival before beginning their close support pattern. The plan was proceeding perfectly until it wasn't. Multiple bogies, launching from concealed positions. Rodriguez called. Radar lock, taking evasive action. Intelligence had missed underground hangars. 3 MiG, 21 seconds old but still lethal, climbed rapidly toward our position. Weapons active. Extraction team, be advised. Unexpected air threat, I transmitted. Recommend holding at safe distance. Negative, Raptor 1, came Commander Hayes' response. We're committed. Clear us a path. The next 10 minutes were aerial combat at its most intense. Banking, rolling, deploying countermeasures while simultaneously attempting to neutralize the threat without compromising the extraction team's approach. The F-35's advanced systems gave us an edge, but the enemy pilots flew with desperate aggression. Rodriguez took a hit to her right wing, damage indicators flashing across her systems. I can maintain flight, but maneuverability is compromised, she reported, voice steady despite the situation. Return to safe altitude, I ordered. I'll handle the remaining threat. Negative. Mission parameters require 2 aircraft for complete coverage. She was right, but keeping her in the fight risked losing both of us. As we maneuvered against the remaining MiG, a ground controller's urgent transmission cut through the tactical chatter. All air assets. Extraction team taking heavy fire at the complex entrance. Request immediate support. We were needed in 2 places simultaneously, dealing with the air threat and supporting the ground team. Standard procedure dictated neutralizing the air threat first to ensure battlefield dominance. In that moment, Elijah's face flashed in my mind. His friend was down there with the extraction team. If we followed procedure, we might lose them all. Rodriguez, maintain engagement with the bogey. I'm supporting the ground team. That splits our forces, she protested. It's against tactical doctrine. Sometimes doctrine doesn't save lives, I replied, already banking my aircraft sharply toward the complex. I dove toward the valley floor, pushing the F-35 to its structural limits. The targeting system identified the hostiles, engaging the extraction team, a reinforced position with heavy machine guns and what appeared to be mortars. Extraction team, Raptor 1 approaching your position. Mark friendly positions. Infrared strobes activated on the SEAL's equipment. identifying them clearly against the background heat signatures. I selected precision munitions, calculating blast radius against the close proximity of friendly forces. "Danger close," I warned. 5 seconds to impact. The strike eliminated the primary threat, but the extraction team was still taking fire from positions inside the complex entrance. With no clean shot available from my current approach, I made a decision that violated every flight safety protocol. I took the F-35 into the narrow valley between mountain faces, flying barely 300 feet above ground level, using the aircraft itself to draw fire away from the extraction team. "Wilson, what the hell are you doing?" Rodriguez's voice crackled through comms as she finished engaging the MiG. "Pull up to safe altitude." I ignored her, focused entirely on providing covering fire as the SEALs moved from the complex entrance toward their extraction point, 6 rescued hostages in tow. Each pass drew more enemy fire toward my aircraft, shields flashing warning indicators as the advanced materials absorbed impacts meant for the men on the ground. 30 seconds to extraction, Hayes transmitted. "We've got all packages secure." As the helicopter descended toward the extraction point, I maintained my dangerous patrol pattern, systems straining under the stress of low altitude, high-speed maneuvering through confined space. Packages aboard, lifting off, came the confirmation I'd been waiting for. Only then did I pull up, climbing rapidly away from the valley, systems screaming warnings about stress tolerances and fuel reserves. My aircraft had taken multiple hits, nothing critical, but enough to require immediate maintenance upon return. The flight back was tense. Rodriguez maintained professional radio discipline, but her silence communicated volumes. I had violated tactical doctrine, endangered my aircraft, and potentially compromised the mission. Court-martial offenses under certain interpretations. When we landed, Henderson was waiting on the tarmac. His expression gave nothing away as the canopy lifted. I removed my helmet, prepared for the consequences of my actions. Instead, he simply said, "Debrief, my office, 1 hour." The formal debrief was predictably tense. Rodriguez accurately reported my deviation from the mission plan. Flight data recordings confirmed the extreme maneuvers and dangerous low-altitude approach. Medical scans showed my heart rate had remained remarkably steady throughout. "Your actions were reckless, endangered a $100 million aircraft, and violated direct tactical guidelines," Henderson summarized after reviewing all evidence. I stared straight ahead. "Yes, sir?" "You also ensured the success of a high-priority extraction and saved 8 American lives." A moment of silence stretched between us. "The SEAL team commander specifically requested I convey his gratitude," Henderson continued. "Apparently you drew fire that would have pinned them down during the critical extraction window." He closed the mission file, studying me with that penetrating gaze. "Lieutenant Martin asked me to give you this." He slid a small object across the desk, a battered challenge coin with a SEAL trident. He says, "Elijah would have been proud." My throat tightened as I accepted the coin. "The thing about tactical doctrine, Wilson," Henderson said more quietly, "is that it's written by people who survived to tell about the times they had to ignore it." 2 weeks later, after the mission details had been appropriately sanitized for the record, I received new flight status documents. Listed under my name was an official call sign that hadn't been there before. Iron Widow. "What does it mean?" I asked Sullivan when he delivered the paperwork. "The designation came from the SEAL team," he explained. "Something about how you flew that day, relentless, precise, like someone with nothing left to lose. The iron part is for that specially modified F-35 you flew, with the enhanced shield systems that took all those hits." "And Widow?" His expression softened slightly. "For Thomas. They said, you flew like someone avenging a loss." I never used the call sign openly. It remained in official records, known to those with appropriate clearance, but not something I discussed. It felt too personal, too connected to what I'd lost and what I'd risked in that mountain valley. But in the quietest moments, alone in the cockpit at 30,000 feet, I sometimes whispered it to myself, not with pride, but as a reminder of promises kept and debts paid. 9 months after the Mountain Valley mission, I received orders to return stateside. My tour complete, I was being reassigned to Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado as an F-35 instructor pilot. The paperwork included commendations for exceptional service under combat conditions and the Distinguished Flying Cross for actions during the extraction operation. Landing at Peterson in late September, the crisp mountain air hit my lungs like clarity itself after months of desert dust and recycled base atmosphere. Aspen trees dotted the landscape with gold against the evergreen backdrop. The Rockies stood sentinel in the distance, so different from the harsh mountains of the combat zone, yet somehow triggering the same vigilance in my peripheral vision. My new apartment, 10 minutes from base, remained mostly empty for weeks. Standard issue furniture, bare walls, unopened moving boxes. I had forgotten how to inhabit a space larger than a barracks room, how to fill silence not punctuated by aircraft noise and alert sirens. The first night stateside, I slept on the floor beside my bed, the mattress feeling too soft, too unfamiliar. The second night, too. By the third week, I'd graduated to sleeping on top of the covers, still fully dressed, boots within reach. The nightmares began subtly, not dramatic wake-up screaming episodes from movies, but persistent, insidious disturbances. Elijah's voice on the radio as his aircraft burned. The infrared signatures of men moving through mountain passes, the crushing responsibility of split-second decisions with lives hanging in the balance. I'd wake at 3:17, exactly the time of Elijah's last transmission, heart-pounding but externally calm, a combat pilot's trained response to emergency. Then I'd sit by the window until dawn, watching the sky lighten, calculating flight paths for aircraft that weren't there. My new assignment brought different challenges. Teaching young pilots the technical aspects of the F-35 was straightforward. Preparing them for the psychological realities of combat was impossible. How do you explain the weight of a wingman's life? The sound of a missile lock warning when it's not a simulation? The way time stretches and compresses simultaneously during a combat engagement? "Sir, what was your most difficult mission?" a fresh-faced lieutenant asked during one training session. I gave the expected answer about challenging weather conditions and complex operational parameters. The truth, watching helplessly as my friend's aircraft spiraled toward the desert floor, remained locked behind carefully constructed compartments in my mind. Captain Lauren Mitchell entered my life 6 months after my return. An Air Force flight surgeon specializing in aviation medicine, she conducted my routine physical with professional efficiency until she reached the psychological screening questions. "You've seen considerable combat activity," she noted, reviewing my file. "Any issues with sleep, concentration, emotional regulation?" "No," I lied, maintaining eye contact. She held my gaze a beat too long, clearly unconvinced. "The body keeps score, Major Wilson, even when we don't acknowledge it consciously." Something about her directness, the absence of pity in her assessment, broke through my defenses just enough. I found myself accepting her invitation to coffee the following week. Coffee became dinner. Dinner led to cautious dating, 2 military professionals navigating the complexities of rank, regulations, and my carefully guarded interior landscape. Lauren was patient, intelligent, and perceptive. She recognized the signs I thought I was hiding: the hypervigilance in public spaces, the vacant stare when certain topics arose, the careful avoidance of news from regions where I'd served. "You know, there's no shame in talking to someone," she suggested one evening as we walked around the small lake near her apartment. "Combat stress is a physiological response, not a character flaw." "I'm fine," I insisted, "just adjusting to instructor life." She didn't press, but her silence communicated volumes. 3 weeks later, she ended things between us. Not dramatically, but with the same clinical precision she brought to her medical practice. "I care about you, Ezra," she said, hands wrapped around a coffee mug in her kitchen. "But you're not present. Not really. You're still flying combat missions in your head." I couldn't argue. She was right. Part of me had never left that desert base, never stopped hearing radio chatter, never stopped calculating threat assessments and escape routes. The Air Force mandated regular psychological evaluations, of course. I became expert at providing exactly the right responses, functional enough to maintain flight status, while avoiding the deeper exploration that might ground me. "How are you processing your combat experiences?" Dr. Frank Marshall would ask during our brief sessions. "Compartmentalizing effectively," I'd reply, using acceptable psychological terminology. "Maintaining operational focus." He'd make notes, nodding. "Any intrusive thoughts? Flashbacks? Sleep disturbances?" "Occasional mission review," I'd acknowledge, admitting just enough to seem candid. nothing that impacts performance. In truth, I was slowly disappearing into a narrowing tunnel of existence. Work, physical training, occasional perfunctory social interactions, then home to my Spartan apartment where I'd sit for hours, reviewing technical manuals or staring at the wall, mind thousands of miles away. I declined invitations to squadron social events, avoided the base Christmas party, didn't fly home for holidays, claiming instructor duties required my presence. My parents' voices grew increasingly concerned during our brief phone conversations. My sister Amy threatened to visit if I didn't start sounding like myself soon. The most telling sign was my complete silence about my achievements. The commendations remained in a drawer, unopened. The Distinguished Flying Cross stayed in its presentation box. I never mentioned the Iron Widow call sign to anyone, as if speaking it might conjure the circumstances that earned it. My extended family knew even less. As far as they were concerned, I pushed papers at an Air Force desk somewhere in Colorado. It was simpler that way, avoiding questions I couldn't or wouldn't answer, expectations I no longer had the energy to manage. Then came the letter from my mother in April, nearly 18 months after my return, handwritten on actual stationery, not an email or text, a rarity in itself that signaled its importance. "Your Uncle Jackson is hosting the annual 4th of July barbecue this year," she wrote. "It would mean so much to have you there. The whole family asks about you. Trevor especially has been wondering how you're doing." I nearly dismissed it immediately. The thought of family small talk, explaining my life in sanitized half-truths, enduring Trevor's inevitable comments about Air Force desk jobs, all of it seemed beyond my capacity. But something in my mother's closing paragraph caught me. "We miss the light in your eyes, Ezra. Whatever happened over there, it doesn't change who you are to us." That night, the dream shifted. Instead of Elijah's burning aircraft, I saw my grandfather's weathered hands passing me his pilot's wings. Instead of radio static, I heard his voice. "The sky doesn't care which branch you serve in, just that you honor those wings every time you take flight." I woke at 3:17 as usual, but this time with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I was dishonoring those wings not by my actions in combat, but by my refusal to live fully after returning, by locking away the experiences rather than integrating them, by allowing the pain to isolate me from the connections that had once given my service meaning. The next morning, I sent my mother a brief message. "I'll be there for the 4th. Save me a burger." It was a small step, but as any pilot knows, even a 1-degree course correction, maintained long enough, will eventually lead to an entirely different destination. July in Virginia brought oppressive humidity that made the air feel like a wet blanket. Uncle Jackson's sprawling backyard in Norfolk showcased his military precision, perfectly trimmed grass, meticulously arranged patio furniture, and an American flag snapping smartly in the breeze. The swimming pool sparkled turquoise against the landscaped garden where cousins, aunts, and uncles gathered in clusters of animated conversation. I sat in my rental car for 15 minutes before finding the resolve to walk up the driveway. 18 months of minimal social interaction had eroded my confidence in navigating even family gatherings. I'd grown accustomed to the straightforward interactions of military life, direct, purpose-driven communication without the nuanced expectations of family dynamics. My mother spotted me first, abandoning a conversation mid-sentence to rush across the lawn. Her embrace felt both foreign and achingly familiar. "You're too thin," she whispered, pulling back to examine me with maternal scrutiny. "Flight suits are unforgiving," I attempted humor. "Can't hide extra pounds at 40,000 feet." My father was next, his farmer's handshake firm, eyes searching mine for something I wasn't sure I could provide. "Good to see you, son." Amy bounced over with her characteristic energy, punching my arm lightly. "The prodigal brother returns." "Nice of you to remember us little people." More relatives approached Aunt Patricia with uncomfortable questions about those places you were stationed, cousins with growing children I barely recognized, extended family whose names I struggled to recall. I maintained the pleasant, slightly distant persona of someone returning from overseas assignments, carefully steering conversations away from specifics. Uncle Jackson approached last, still ramrod straight at 60 despite retirement. His handshake was evaluative, measuring my grip against some internal standard. "Ezra, heard you're teaching now." "Yes, sir. Peterson Air Force Base." He nodded. "Important work, preparing the next generation." I caught sight of Trevor across the yard, now 30, and sporting an expensive haircut and designer polo that screamed corporate success. He raised his beer in acknowledgement, but continued his conversation with two admiring female cousins. The afternoon progressed with forced normalcy. I helped my father man the grill, flipping burgers and hot dogs while fielding questions about Colorado weather and Air Force regulations. The routine task kept my hands busy and provided a buffer against more probing conversations. "Still a meat and potatoes man?" my father asked, passing me a plate. "Some things don't change," I replied, though, in truth, I rarely cooked for myself anymore, subsisting on base meals and protein bars. The real challenge came after eating, when family members dispersed into conversational groups across the yard. Without the structured task of grilling, I found myself adrift, hyper-aware of exit routes and scanning for safe conversation partners. I was washing my hands at the outdoor sink when Trevor approached, bourbon in hand, confidence radiating off him like expensive cologne. "So," he said, leaning against the nearby post, "what exactly do you do all day? Push papers for the Army?" Several family members within earshot paused their conversations. The casual dismissal in his tone, "Army, not Air Force," was deliberate, designed to provoke. I dried my hands on a checkered towel, feeling that familiar burn in my chest. "No, I pilot," I replied simply. He chuckled. "Sure you do. What's your call sign? Chair Force One?" The old Trevor, unchanged since childhood, still defining himself through comparison and competition. In another life, I might have walked away or deflected with humor. But standing there, something shifted inside me, a realignment of something long dislocated. "Iron Widow," I said quietly. Across the yard, Uncle Jackson froze mid-conversation, beer halted halfway to his lips. The name clearly registered, his military background providing context my civilian relatives lacked. He set down his beer and crossed the yard with purposeful strides. "Son," he said to Trevor, voice tight, "say sorry now." Trevor blinked, confusion replacing smugness. "What? Why? We're just talking. You have no idea who you're talking to." Jackson cut him off, turning to me with new eyes. "Iron Widow. Qatar deployment 18 months ago. Special extraction operation near the Afghan border." I held his gaze, neither confirming nor denying. "You flew that mission?" he asked, voice lower. "The one that pulled out those men from the mountain complex?" Trevor looked between us, comprehension dawning that he'd stumbled into waters far deeper than he'd imagined. "I was there," I acknowledged simply. Uncle Jackson's weathered face transformed, professional respect replacing family familiarity. "I knew that team, consulted on their training program before retirement. What you did..." He paused, searching for appropriate words in mixed company. "Let's just say your actions are still discussed in certain circles." The yard had gone oddly quiet, family members sensing something significant unfolding without understanding its dimensions. Trevor, to his credit, recognized the shift. "Ezra, I didn't know." "That was the point," I said. "Some things aren't for sharing at family barbecues." Uncle Jackson placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of solidarity I hadn't expected. "Why don't we take a walk?" he suggested. "I've got a bottle of 18-year-old scotch that deserves better company than it's been keeping." We ended up on his deck overlooking the water, Trevor awkwardly joining us at his father's insistence. The scotch burned pleasantly, loosening something that had been tightly bound within me for too long. "I was stateside coordination for that operation," Jackson revealed once we were seated. "Not directly involved, but I saw the intelligence, the planning." He shook his head. "When they told me the air support pilot took an F-35 into that valley at 300 feet, I thought they were exaggerating." "They probably were," I said, staring into the amber liquid. "It was closer to 250. Jackson made a sound between a whistle and a laugh. "Jesus." Trevor sat silently. His earlier bravado evaporated. "We lost good men before that extraction succeeded," Jackson continued. "Your actions that day..." He trailed off, military stoicism preventing further sentiment. "I lost someone too," I said, surprising myself with the admission. "My wingman, earlier in the deployment. Elijah Thomas. Missile strike during a civilian evacuation." The words hung in the humid air between us. I'd never spoken them so directly, not even during debriefs. "Is that why?" Trevor began, then hesitated. "Why what?" "Why you disappeared, after coming back." His tone held no judgment now, only dawning comprehension. "Mom said, Aunt Sarah hasn't heard from you in months." I stared across the water, gathering thoughts I'd never fully articulated. When you're over there, everything is immediate, tactical, mission-focused. You don't process, you just function. Then you come home, and suddenly you're supposed to care about mortgage rates and Netflix shows and whether the supermarket has the right brand of cereal. Jackson nodded. The disconnect. Everything feels trivial by comparison. But you can't explain that without sounding like an asshole, Trevor supplied unexpectedly. Like you think you're better than everyone because you've seen things they haven't. I looked at him with newfound appreciation. Exactly. So you just check out instead, he concluded. Easier than navigating the middle ground. Something like that. Jackson refilled our glasses. You been talking to anyone about it? Professionally? I shrugged. The mandatory sessions. Enough to keep flying. That's not the same thing. No, I admitted, it's not. The conversation shifted then, Jackson sharing controlled versions of his own deployment experiences, Trevor asking thoughtful questions that surprised me with their insight. As dusk settled over the water, something eased in my chest, not healing exactly, but perhaps the precondition for it. Acknowledgement. When we rejoined the main gathering, the dynamic had shifted subtly. Trevor's attitude toward me had transformed from competitive dismissal to something approaching respect. Uncle Jackson introduced me to several of his former colleagues, with meaningful glances that conveyed unspoken context. Most significantly, I found myself actually present in conversations, not merely performing the expected social role while mentally elsewhere. When my mother asked about Colorado, I described the view from my apartment window with genuine appreciation for the first time. When Amy teased about my lack of communication, I promised and meant to call more regularly. As fireworks bloomed over the water later that evening, Trevor sat beside me on the dock, away from the main group. I've been a jerk, he said without preamble. Not just today, for years. We were kids, I shrugged. Family rivalries happen. Not just then, even after you joined up. He tossed a pebble into the dark water. I think I was jealous. Of what? The glamorous barracks life? Military cuisine? He laughed softly. Of the purpose, the clarity. I sell investment portfolios to people who already have more money than they need. You. Chase insurgents around mountains? Make decisions that actually matter, he corrected. Dad talks about service like it's sacred. I never understood that until today, seeing how he looked at you. The admission hung between us. Neither comfortable nor uncomfortable, simply true. For what it's worth, I said after a moment, I envied your certainty. You always knew exactly who you were, what you wanted. Projection is a hell of a drug, he replied with surprising self-awareness. I've been faking that confidence since high school. The fireworks finale erupted overhead, cascading light reflecting on the water's surface. In that moment, something shifted permanently, not just between Trevor and me, but within my understanding of how to carry the weight of my experiences. I couldn't compartmentalize them forever, but perhaps I didn't need to explain them to be understood. Perhaps the connections I'd been avoiding were exactly what I needed to begin integrating the fractured pieces of before and after. As we walked back toward the house, Trevor asked quietly, "Do you ever fly civilians? In trainer aircraft or something?" "Sometimes." "Why?" "I'd like to understand it better. What you do." He shrugged, embarrassment evident even in the dim light. "If that's not weird." "Not weird," I assured him, surprising myself with the truth of it. "Next time you're in Colorado, look me up." It wasn't healing, not yet. But it was the first step on a long-delayed journey home. The drive back to Colorado gave me 800 miles of open highway to consider the seismic shift that had occurred during the 4th of July weekend. Something fundamental had changed, not dramatically like in movies, but in the quiet, consequential way that real transformation happens. I'd taken the first step toward reconnection by simply allowing myself to be seen, however partially. Upon returning to base, I did something I'd been avoiding for 18 months. I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Rachel Morgan at the Veterans Center in Denver, a civilian psychologist specializing in military trauma. Not the mandatory base sessions designed to tick administrative boxes, but genuine therapeutic engagement. "What brings you here today, Major Wilson?" she asked during our first session, her office deliberately unclinical with comfortable furniture and soft lighting. "I need to find my way back," I said simply. Back where? She asked. I considered the question. To myself, I suppose. To whoever I am now. After everything, she nodded. No platitudes or easy reassurances. That's honest. And it's a good place to start. The work was harder than any military training I'd endured. Unlike physical challenges with clear metrics for success, this healing followed no predictable trajectory. Some sessions left me drained and hollow. Others brought unexpected clarity. Dr. Morgan never pushed for dramatic breakthroughs or emotional catharsis, focusing instead on practical strategies for integrating my experiences. Trauma changes the brain's wiring, she explained during one session. The goal isn't to get over it or return to who you were before. It's to build new pathways, new connections. 3 months into therapy, I took a step that had seemed impossible before. I contacted Elijah's family in Brooklyn. The conversation with his parents was difficult but necessary, not just for them, but for me. I shared stories of their son that military reports hadn't captured. His terrible jokes during pre-flight checks, his unshakable Yankees loyalty, the paperback novels he'd read during downtime. He talked about you in his letters, Mrs. Thomas said. Her voice warmed despite the grief that still lined her face. Said you were the most methodical pilot he'd ever seen. That he felt safe flying with you. The words simultaneously wounded and healed. I hadn't kept him safe in the end, but knowing he'd trusted me offered a measure of peace I hadn't expected. That winter, I established Wings of Recovery, an unofficial support program for aviators dealing with combat-related stress. Starting small with just 3 other pilots, we met weekly in a community center room in Colorado Springs, sharing experiences that couldn't be understood by those who hadn't lived them. The thing no one tells you, Captain James Ferguson said during one meeting, is how the normalcy afterward feels almost offensive. Like, how dare the world just continue when everything's changed? Heads nodded around the circle. The universal experience of returning to a civilian world that seemed simultaneously precious and trivial after combat deployment. My commanding officer, Colonel Harrigan, noticed the change in my instructional approach. Your students report you're connecting the technical aspects to operational realities more effectively, he noted during my performance review. They appreciate the context. I'd begun incorporating psychological preparation alongside technical training, not just how to fly the aircraft, but how to process the weight of the decisions they might face in combat situations. How to support each other afterward. How to recognize when the mission had come home with them in ways that required attention. Spring brought an unexpected reunion when Trevor visited Colorado on business. True to his word at the barbecue, he'd reached out, and I arranged for him to tour the base and even experience a simulator session. That was both amazing and terrifying, he admitted afterward, removing the simulator helmet with newfound respect, and that was without anyone shooting at me. Most of flying is routine, I assured him. The challenging parts make the stories, but they're not the everyday reality. Over dinner that evening, our conversation ventured into territory we'd never explored before, his struggles with corporate expectations, my ongoing therapy, our shared childhood viewed through adult perspectives. Dad talks about you all the time now, he mentioned, somewhat ruefully. The prodigal nephew returned. Hardly prodigal, I countered. Just finding my way back. He studied me across the table. You seem different, more present. Working on it, I acknowledged. Daily process. The most unexpected development came in late spring when I met Sophie Ellis, an elementary school teacher whose brother had served as a Marine in Afghanistan. We connected at a community fundraiser for veterans' mental health services, her warmth and direct manner cutting through my lingering social awkwardness. My brother came back different, she said during our first coffee date. It took years before he could talk about it, before he felt like himself again. And now? I asked. He says he's not the same person who left, but he's at peace with who he is now. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. I think that's all any of us can hope for, trauma or not, to accept the people we become along the way. Her understanding created space for me to be honest about my ongoing journey. The therapy, the nightmares that still occasionally surfaced, the ways in which combat experience had permanently altered my perspective. Instead of being deterred, she appreciated the self-awareness those challenges had forced. By the following 4th of July, exactly 1 year after the transformative barbecue at Uncle Jackson's, my life had expanded in ways I couldn't have imagined. The Wings of Recovery program had grown to 3 separate groups. My reputation as an instructor, who addressed both technical and human aspects of combat flying, had led to additional teaching responsibilities. Most significantly, I'd begun flying recreational aircraft again, not for mission purposes or training requirements, but for the pure joy that had initially drawn me to the sky. Solo flights in a small Cessna over the Colorado mountains became a form of meditation, reconnecting me with the freedom and peace that flying had represented before it became associated with combat decisions. That summer, my parents visited Colorado for the first time, showing them my world, my apartment now properly furnished and personalized, my favorite hiking trails. The base where I instructed created a bridge between my military identity and my family roots that had been missing for too long. "I worried we'd lost you," my mother admitted one evening as we watched sunset paint the mountains in spectacular oranges and pinks, not physically but essentially. "I think I worried about the same thing," I confessed. "That whatever defined me before couldn't survive what happened there." "And now?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. "Now, I understand that it's not about recovering who I was before, it's about integrating all of it before, during, after, into whoever I'm becoming." She squeezed my hand, maternal understanding requiring no further words. The following month brought an unexpected opportunity when Colonel Harrigan called me to his office. "The Air Force Academy is revamping their combat psychology curriculum," he explained. "They want someone with both instructional experience and operational background. I recommended you. The position would mean stepping away from active flying duties, focusing instead on preparing cadets for the psychological realities of combat service not just during deployment, but in the critical months following return." "You think I'm qualified?" I asked, genuinely uncertain. "I think you've lived it," he replied. "And more importantly, you've found your way through it. That's what these kids need to see, not just how to survive over there, but how to live when they come back." I accepted the position, recognizing it as an opportunity to transform my hardest experiences into something constructive for others following similar paths. The work brought new purpose, allowing me to reframe my combat experience not just as something to overcome, but as wisdom earned at great cost that could now serve others. On the anniversary of Elijah's death, I took a solo flight at sunset not to escape the memory, but to honor it. Banking through golden hour light over the Rockies, I felt his presence not as a ghost or burden, but as a thread in the fabric of my life story. The grief hadn't disappeared, but it had evolved from a crushing weight into a solemn responsibility to live fully in his absence. That evening, after landing, I finally opened the small wooden box containing my grandfather's pilot's wings from Vietnam. I'd kept them stored away since his passing, unable to reconcile their meaning with my complicated relationship with flying after combat. Now, looking at the tarnished metal catching the last light through my window, I understood something he'd tried to tell me years ago. The sky doesn't care which battles you've fought or what burdens you carry. It simply offers the same freedom. It always has the perspective that comes from rising above, seeing the larger landscape beyond immediate struggles. The wings weren't symbols of combat, but of transcendence, the human capacity to rise above limitation, to gain perspective, to return changed but intact. The true measure of courage, I've come to understand, isn't found in dramatic moments of battlefield heroism, though those certainly require it. The deeper courage lies in the quiet, daily decision to engage fully with life after experiencing its fragility, to remain open rather than armored, to allow connection despite knowing the pain of loss. My call sign, Iron Widow, represented a moment when I flew through danger with nothing left to lose. But the greater victory has been learning to navigate life with everything, to lose again, relationships, vulnerability, hope for the future. Finding the courage to care deeply, despite knowing exactly how painful loss can be. This isn't a story about heroics or exceptional circumstances. It's about the journey we all face in different forms, learning to integrate our most painful experiences rather than being defined by them. Finding pathways back to connection when isolation seems safer. Discovering that strength isn't about being unbreakable, but about piecing yourself together differently after breaking. As I watched the sun slip behind the mountains, I realized that every flight path, whether in aircraft or in life, requires both navigation and adaptation. We set a course knowing conditions will change, requiring adjustments along the way. The destination isn't fixed, it evolves as we do. The real courage isn't in never experiencing turbulence, but in continuing to fly through it, making countless small corrections, trusting the journey even when the horizon disappears temporarily from view. That's the lesson I hope to pass on to every cadet, every pilot, every person struggling to reconcile who they were before with who they've become after. The sky remains open. The journey continues. And sometimes, the most important flight path leads not outward, but home. Have you ever had to reinvent yourself after a life-changing experience? Or found unexpected understanding from someone you thought could never relate to your struggles? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life journeys of transformation. Thank you for flying with me today. Until next time, keep your horizon steady and your heart open.